Well, hello, and welcome back to Kelly's Corner. It's good to be here. I know it's been a few weeks. It's been a busy couple of weeks. I was gonna do an episode right around Mother's Day to honor that day because our mothers deserve it. And I had some things to say, but then I got busy. And then right after that, I got sick. So this is going to kind of be more of a hodgepodge episode than normal, I guess. We're going to talk about several different things instead of one specific thing. But I did want to start out and talk about Mother's Day since I didn't get to do an episode then. I not only do I have my mother, I still have a grandmother who I've talked about on previous episodes, and we'll talk about on episodes to come as well. But I've been blessed, very much so. I lost my last great grandmother when I was 21. So over the course of my life, I knew all four of my great grandmothers, and both grandmothers, and of course my own mother. But I consider myself to be very fortunate, very blessed, to have been able to have known all four of my great grandmothers, and to have had a close relationship with three of the four. I did know my dad's mom, but of the four, she was the one that I was least closest to. But I was very close to the others. Probably most close to my Mama Betty, who, like I said, I lost when I was 21. And even to this day, she's my favorite person to have ever lived. I happen to know for a fact that I was hers as well. We had a special bond. She called me her baby. And I mean, not to, to brag or anything, but I do know that I was her favorite. And she certainly was mine. And I don't know that there's a day that goes by that I don't at least think about her in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But I love all of my mothers. Because, without our mothers, we wouldn't be who we are. And so we owe a debt of gratitude to them. And then, like I mentioned, right around Mother's Day, I got sick, and I have been struggling to recover the last couple weeks. So if you hear me clear my throat through the course of this episode, which is very possible that you will, just know that's why. I came down with strep right after Mother's Day, strep throat. That's something that, from a small child into adulthood, that's the sickness that if anybody's going to have it, it's going to be me. I think everybody has some kind of illness that, when it comes around, they're susceptible to it, and strep throat's mine. My friends used to joke with me that if I was stopped at a red light and someone in the car next to me had their windows rolled up and somebody in that vehicle had strep, that I was going to catch it. And there's all in jest and joke, but, they're maybe not too far off. But then I had strep, and then developed a secondary illness, an upper respiratory infection. And that, being an asthmatic, when I get respiratory issues, they always seem to linger a little longer than they do the normal regular person. And so I'm still kind of dealing with a little bit of that. But I do feel a lot better, and I'm on the mend. And then last week was my brother's birthday. So shout out to Matthew. He turned 38, I believe. because I say that because I think I'm 39. Um, when you get to a certain point, you can't keep up with how old you are, and I guess I've reached that point. But I do think I'm 39, which means that he just turned 38. And then this past Sunday, I was able to attend one of the coolest concerts I've ever attended. When I drove up to Pelham, Tennessee, and saw the Oak Ridge Boys. Go figure, because if I'm going to a concert, that's going to be who I'm going to go see 9 times out of 10. But they performed a show at the Caverns there in Pelham, Tennessee, literally underground. One of the coolest shows I've ever been to. Very neat venue. If you ever have the opportunity to go to the Caverns, go, because it is interesting. It is neat to see, and to hear how the acoustics are different from being above ground, and how cool the lighting is, because it does have a little bit of a different feel to it than a regular concert venue. But it was very cool. I always love to see those guys. Looking forward to seeing them again in a couple of weeks in Renfrew Valley. Really looking forward to that show, even though it will be above ground. I was telling Dwayne Allen several months ago when the Caverns show was first announced, that last summer I was swimming in my grandparents' pool, and as I swim and float and relax and just spend some quiet time with myself and reflections and things, I listen to music. There are very few times in my life when music isn't going, but I listen to music as I swim, especially if I'm swimming alone. This particular day, I was floating in my grandparents' pool, and it was quiet and calm and peaceful, and I was listening to music. Had my my Bluetooth speaker going, and I don't remember what song was playing, but the next thing I heard, I heard a plop, and I knew what had happened. I knew my Bluetooth had fallen in the water somehow. I still don't know how it happened, but it fell in the water, so I immediately jumped off the float to go save my Bluetooth speaker. Swam over to it, got there, and as I was getting closer to it, I could hear that it was still playing, and I could hear Dwayne singing underwater, and it sounded just as good as above the ground, above the water, just like I was in person. So I told him, when they first announced the Caverns show, I said, I've heard you sing in concert venues above ground. I've heard you sing under the water, and now I'm going to get to hear you sing below ground. And I know you'll sing just as well as you do in the other two situations. And I was right. It sounded just as good. And I knew it would. But like I said, I'm looking forward to hearing him again in a couple of weeks, and seeing him, and maybe, Lord willing, getting to catch up a little bit. I don't know about where you guys are from, but this week is graduation week here in Alabama, specifically in this area of Alabama. My neighbor graduated from high school last night. Most of the local area high schools graduated last night. Some friends had children graduate last night. I know one friend had her daughter graduated on Tuesday night. But my neighbor graduated last night, and he's actually going into the Navy in a couple of weeks. And I know he'll do well. But I'm sure he's probably a little bit nervous right about now, as it gets closer and the days and the time ticks away to when he has to report. But congratulations to all the graduates of the class of 2025, whether it's, kindergarten, high school, or college. Your hard work is to be commended, and it is recognized, and you have every right in the world to be proud of yourself. This is Memorial Day weekend, and I was talking to a friend of mine tonight, and we were going to eat, and we passed this sign that said Happy Memorial Day, and I said, it's kind of an odd thing to say, tell somebody Happy Memorial Day, and people say it, and they probably don't even think about what they're saying when they say it. But how can you tell somebody Happy Memorial Day when you're literally celebrating the fact that somebody died? I mean, because that's what Memorial Day is. It's recognizing and remembering the servicemen and women who gave their life, who, whether in combat or in, a non-combat situation, whatever the case may be. That's what Memorial Day is. It's not a day to honor all the service members. It's what, Veterans Day and other quote holidays are for. Memorial Day is a day to remember the fact that there have been 1.19 million service members since the American Revolution, American service members since the American Revolution, that have given their life. 651,031 of those were combat deaths, and 539,054 were non-combat deaths. But 1.19 million people, fought, put on the uniform, pledged their life and loyalty. They literally signed a blank check to America and were willing to pay the price. President John F. Kennedy once said, "The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that's the path of surrender or submission." And there's a lot of truth to that. I have a friend of mine now, like I just mentioned, my neighbor's about to go into their son's about to go into the Navy. I have a friend of mine, my Sunday school teacher actually, her grandson is in the United States Air Force. So I mean there are still young people willing to serve our great country. Thankfully, because without them and their willingness, we wouldn't be free. We wouldn't be able to enjoy the freedoms that we have. And so as you go throughout this weekend, realize, yes, spend time with your family, and yes, barbecue, and yes, swim, and yes, do all those things. But take some time to think about the fact that there was a price to be paid. Somebody had to pay for us to get the day off. Somebody had to pay for us to have the freedoms that we have, to be able to enjoy the time we have with our families. Somebody fought and died for us to still speak English, for us to have the freedom of speech, for me to even have the freedom to have this podcast. Freedom's not free, folks. It came with a price. And I'm thankful that there are people that step across that line every day and they're willing to pay for it. And I truly hope that, everybody comes home and makes it back to their families. But the fact of the matter is, that hasn't been the case. 1.19 million people since the American Revolution didn't make it back home. And that's what this weekend is about, and that's what this holiday is about. And if you don't know of one personally, I'll tell you one you can think about. And I'll encourage you to even look up this movie that I'm going to tell you about. And it's one of my favorite movies, and I watch it every single year at some point during Memorial Day weekend, and this year will be no different. And it's called Taking Chance. Kevin Bacon plays an army man who literally takes Chance home. Chance is a real person. Chance Phelps. He was posthumously promoted to Lance Corporal. But Lance Corporal Chance Phelps was killed in action on April the 9th of 2004, literally a month before I graduated high school. But he was killed in action in Ramadi, Iraq, while conducting convoy escorts. And during those escorts, his unit came under attack by heavy small arms fire, which included rocket-propelled grenades. And despite being wounded in the combat fire, He refused to be evacuated and instead chose to man his machine gun to cover the evacuations of the rest of his convoy. And upon withdrawing, Lance Corporal Chance Phelps sustained a fatal head wound. And it's said in the movie Taking Chance that he wasn't even supposed to be on duty that day. It was his day off. But his comrades in arms, his battle buddies, were going, so he was going to go with them. And he paid the ultimate sacrifice. Lance Corporal Chance Phelps was 19 years old on that day in Iraq, the day that he lost his life. And the movie is about his journey home. So if you've never seen the movie Taking Chance, take the time to watch it. Google him, Lance Corporal Chance Phelps. Look up his picture. Look into his face. And if you don't know of anybody else personally that has lost their lives in service to our country, now you know of Lance Corporal Chance Phelps. Remember him. Remember his name. Look up the movie. Watch Band of Brothers. That's another good one too. But there's a lot to remember this weekend. A lot to be thankful for. A lot to be grateful for. I don't know that it would be a Kelly's Corner episode of a podcast if we didn't talk about some history other than Memorial Day and Lance Corporal Chance Phelps. But 30 years ago today, May the 23rd of 1995, Full House, the series with Bob Saget, Candace Cameron, and Jodie Sweetin, and John Stamos, and Dave Coulier, and Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, and Jodie Sweetin, Andrea Barber, Kimmy Gibbler. Anyway, 30 years ago, Full House ended. 30 years ago today. And as a 80s baby and a 90s kid, I think all of us probably watched Full House. Every now and then I'll still watch a rerun. But they don't, I've mentioned on this show many times that I like classic TV and they don't make shows like they used to. And there's a lot of truth to that. I would much rather watch, classic TV, or even something like Full House, than I would any of the stuff on TV today. So if you're looking for a podcast that's going to cover recent TV shows and things like that, this is probably not the one for you. Something else cool about today, 91 years ago today, May the 23rd of 1934, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow, otherwise known as Bonnie and Clyde, were shot and killed by Texas and Louisiana law enforcement officers in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. Bonnie Parker was shot 26 times. Clyde Barrow was shot 17 times. And interesting to note that there were 130 rounds fired total by those law enforcement officers that day. And they were hit so many times and had so many bullet holes in them that it is said that the funeral homes that they were sent to had difficulty embalming them, that they had difficulty keeping the embalming fluid inside of them because they had so many holes in their body that it was leaking out. And I believe that they're both buried at two different cemeteries, I know, and I believe they're both in Dallas, Texas, somewhat close to each other, if not both in Dallas City, just outside of Dallas. Maybe one of them is buried. But I do know they're very, very close to one another. But they were ambushed on this day 91 years ago. And interesting to note, the Bonnie and Clyde car is at some casino somewhere in Las Vegas. So if I ever get out to Las Vegas, I'm gonna hunt that down because I think it would be cool to see. I mean, I've seen pictures, but Pictures don't do in-person stuff justice. And then something else that I couldn't do an episode this week of a podcast or anything without mentioning that 108 years ago, on May the 29th of 1917, President John F. Kennedy was born in Brookline, Massachusetts. He was the second oldest. He had an older brother, Joseph Jr., who was coincidentally killed in World War II. So he's one of the 1.9 million that people that have given their lives for this country. And he is one of the 651,031 combat deaths. So I guess without him, there would be 651,030 combat deaths. But he's the extra one. But he was killed in action. His plane exploded on a secret mission, and he was killed somewhere over the English Channel. His body was never recovered. I believe he has a cemetery plot, even though his body was never recovered. I believe there's a memorial marker in one of the cemeteries over in Europe dedicated to him. And then I know that there is a memorial marker in Arlington National Cemetery in the Kennedy plot there in Arlington, dedicated to him as well. So if you ever go, as you walk by President Kennedy, and then you get to Robert Kennedy, and then you get to Ted Kennedy, and just past Ted Kennedy, there's a memorial marker there to Joseph Patrick Kennedy Jr., who was JFK's older brother. But he was the second of what ended up being 9 children born to Joseph and Rose Kennedy there in Brookline, Massachusetts. A very sickly child. He was given the last rites a couple of different times during his life. The first time being at age 2, when he had, I think it was scarlet fever. But he was given the last rites of the Catholic Church a couple of different times, and then he went on to fight in World War II. He was one of the ones that he fought in the Navy. He was a lieutenant and led PT Boat 109. Was actually leading the PT boat. He was the commander of the PT boat when it was cut in half. He almost died that night as well, but ended up saving his men by scratching a note on a coconut and giving it to some natives who took it, who knew who to take it to, and took it to the American base, and they ended up rescuing him. And then he goes into politics. John F. Kennedy was never, as a child, supposed to go into politics. That was supposed to be his older brother Joe's job. His older brother Joe was supposed to be the first Catholic president. That was his father's ambition and goal for him. But getting killed in action thrust John into that position. And so after the war, John goes into politics. In 1946, he runs for the House of Representatives and wins a Senate seat, wins the House seat. And then in 1952, he runs for Senate and wins the Senate. And he gets married in 1953 to Jacqueline Bouvier. They have 2 children. Well, they have 4 children, actually. Their first child was stillborn. And then Caroline came in 1957. John F. Kennedy Jr. was born just after his father was elected president. During the acceptance speech, President Kennedy actually said that he and his wife were preparing for a, quote, new administration and a new baby. John F. Kennedy Jr. was born a couple of weeks later. Actually, a few days before his sister, John F. Kennedy Jr. was born on November the 25th of 1960, and Caroline Kennedy was born on November the 27th of 1957. so they have their birth dates are 2 days apart. Interesting to note, and we'll talk about this later on in the year, but John F. Kennedy Jr.'s third birthday was actually the date of his father's funeral. And after the funeral, they had a small family party for him at the White House. But anyway, in 1963, their fourth son, Patrick, was born, and then he was born with a lung condition and passed away 2 days after he was born. Shortly before his father was assassinated, actually. Patrick died in August of 63, and then John Kennedy was assassinated in November of 1963. He went on to serve as the 35th president of the United States. He was the youngest person ever elected the president of the United States, at least to date. And then to date, he was the youngest person to serve as president to die in office, or to die, period. At the time of his assassination, he was 46 years old. But if he were alive today on the 29th, he would celebrate his 108th birthday. It would have been interesting to see how history would have been different had the events of November 1963 not occurred in Dallas. But that was not to be. So it is what it is. But I guess that's about all I've got to say. I feel like I'm kind of trying to lose my voice again, so I guess I probably should wrap this up before I go completely laryngitis and can't speak. But it was good to be back doing another episode. I promise there won't be a 3-week gap, in doing another episode again. A lot of things have gone on behind the scenes to have made this where it ended up being a little longer than I wanted it to be before, in between episodes. But I appreciate your patience, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. And if there's, like I said, if there's something you want me to talk about in a later episode, feel free to leave it in the comments. If you know how to get in touch with me, get in touch with me. Because I'd love to talk about what you guys want me to talk about. But I hope everybody has a great weekend. Have a safe weekend. And take some time this weekend to remember that the freedoms that we have are not free, and they should not be taken lightly. But until next time, I hope everyone has a great night, and I'll talk at you later. Bye.